Salam and welcome back, everybody, to our podcast, Unapologetic, the Third Narrative.
Our original and authentic initiative in light of the war in Israel and Gaza.
A platform where we will share our identities, views, and experience from the ground. So, Ibrahim, in the first episode, our pilot, we introduced the podcast, talked about what the third narrative that we preach is, and we talked about our vision with a few examples of what's going on in Gaza. And of course, we will delve into everything about the war today, in today's episode. But how about we remind our viewers why we're here?
It's important to remind our listeners that what is our vision and why we started this initiative. Because we're seeing, first of all, the importance of the West and the involvement of the West in ending this war and the conflict overall. And what's happening right now is that the West has gone to a place of only two existing narratives, either pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, and it's an either or. You're one over the other. And we delved into it much more in detail in our pilot, for those who want to listen more about this black and white division that we've seen. And it's, at the end of the day, it results in two things. One thing that's affecting us is aggravating for more war, because you're pushing us to defeat each other. Either Israelis defeat Palestinians or Palestinians defeat Israelis. The second thing is much more closer to you in the West, to home, which is the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism.
You're absolutely right. If we look at each and every protest that's going on, part of it, some people are going with malintentions. Some people are going to promote the hate that they have towards the other side, whether that means advocating to flatten Gaza, to turn it into a parking lot, remove Gaza from the map and name it Nova, which is the name of the festival that was victim to the attack of Hamas on October the 7th. And on the other side, there are people that are advocating to hate towards Jews, to remove Israel from the map, to attack all Jews everywhere, that Jews aren't safe anymore. And that is being translated in the real world on actual hate crimes. A 6-year-old was stabbed in Chicago in the beginning of the conflict. There are, in California, synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses are being vandalized. And the flyers of the kidnapped children are being removed by pro-Palestinians.
That pisses me off. I'm sorry. Like, this particular one,
it doesn't help us. If you think that removing a person who's kidnapped, a person that was that was tortured, removing their missing persons poster, if you think that helps the Palestinian cause, you're very much mistaken.
I don't understand how, honestly, like someone who is, in the West advocating for our humanity, and we want to talk about humanity, but you're eliminating somebody else, the other side's humanity. These are not posters of soldiers. This is not, things that has to do with a war and two sides battling. This is innocent people that were kidnapped from inside their homes. It includes kids, grandmas. I cannot understand how someone thinks that this is a pro-Palestinian act to rip off the kidnapped. You want to do something good? Post the pictures of the Palestinians that are dying. Don't eliminate the ones of the Israelis that are dying, because that's also true. We're not trying to hide the truth. These are the truths. People have been kidnapped. Palestinians are dying. And we should put all of these to the surface and not hide one instead of the other, but show everything.
Since we're talking about the victims from both sides and the people that were kidnapped, the Israelis that were kidnapped, let's talk about the numbers. Let's bring statistics to the table. It's 240, right? 240 with one recent release.
A couple days ago, correct. It was one soldier who was released by Hamas. And we also saw yesterday a video from two of the girls who are in captivity. And they released a really a horrific video. I don't have another word to say about it. They clearly know what's going on in the ground.
They know what's happening between diplomats and between governments.
Exactly. They were discussing, the Prime Minister Netanyahu's a stalemate on negotiations for the hostages. They were aware of a lot of the information that was going on in a prisoner exchange in one way or another. For Gilad Shalit, who was, for those who don't know, who was an Israeli soldier and was kidnapped by Hamas, 1,027 prisoners were released. Hamas prisoners were released by Israel for the exchange of one soldier.
And now we're talking about a situation that people are asking for an all for all.
All for all, because we have about 5,000 Hamas people in Israeli jails, and the families of the hostages are saying, if you released one, and it was a soldier, we're in war, for the price of 1,000, what do we talk about? 240, which we don't know exactly the statistics of how many are civilians and how many are soldiers, but there's a huge number of civilians. How do we not exchange those people? But the problem is I don't know. What do you think is going to happen with the kidnapped?
When we hear about the numbers of Palestinians that are dying, that are perishing in Gaza, do you think that the Israeli government knows how to differentiate between where the civilians are, where their hostages are, and where Hamas is? They don't know. For all they know, they might have harmed their own civilians, and they're not putting that into consideration. And we have from the families here protests, ceasefire, have a negotiation, bring all for all, their prisoners to for our kidnapped. And right now, people are out for blood. Both Hamas, which have bluntly said on air that they are willing to sacrifice or to pay the price of their civilians, that it's quote unquote not their responsibility. And
that it's the responsibility of Israel to protect the Gazan civilians, while the tunnels that they build is only for the Hamas operations alone. The
Hamas representative during an interview said that the Gazan civilians are in this situation due to the occupation, which makes it the international community's responsibility in addition to Israel, which is causing the occupation. And
what about our own role to our own people?
Exactly.
If we're, set aside that it's a terror organization, okay? Any militant group, and you're trying to go against an adversary. At least for me, the rational sense says that part of your strategy while you're building is to have something to protect your own citizens in the meantime. But to completely not even have it as part of your strategy and to say, well, I'm sorry, this is the price of our war, and well, you know what? I mean, it's the international community's responsibility in the first place. How dare you? You are part of these people. You came from these people.
These people are in this situation partially, if not completely, because of your actions.
We're gonna delve into the past and what led to us to where we are today. But as the governing body of Gaza, it's your responsibility as the governing body, 1,000%. If you want to hold responsibility and being the one that takes the money and the support and everything into your territory, you're supposed to be responsible for everything within your territory, including your people.
And the same goes for the Israeli government. Whether it's right now in the current situation in Gaza, their responsibility to their kidnapped and the civilians that are in Gaza that are under their occupation, in addition to the big embarrassment that happened to the IDF on the 7th of October.
Absolutely. That's the responsibility of the Israeli government to protect their people. And they failed. They're
continuing to fail.
And they continue to fail to, even to provide the needs of the people who are being evacuated from towns in the north and in the south.
It's all the civilians.
Chaos. It's the civilians who picked up the slack and are taking care of the things that the government has failed to do so far.
And
Absolutely.
I think it's nice to highlight, or something, a light of hope in this podcast, to highlight how the people here, Arabs, Jews, Druze, everyone is coming together to help those affected, especially in the south and currently up north, people that are being evacuated, people that are displaced, even Palestinians in the West Bank that are coming together to help provide those that were in Israel either for job purposes or for health reasons in Israeli hospitals that are now displaced because their permit got canceled because of what happened on the 7th. And the Palestinian people also came together beautifully to help those that were displaced. So this is where we are today. Let's talk about a little bit of history, how we got here. Now, I want to clarify, me and Ibrahim are nothing close to historians. We're not politicians. For me, at least, I don't even want to be a politician. But we're going to share a few things from our understanding, from our experience and our own analysis. And let's start from the Oslo process in 1993, where the Palestinian autonomy was created. and the Palestinian Authority rose to power, and there was a creation of a process towards a two-state solution based on the 67 borders.
Yeah, I think it's really is the place, in my opinion, to start to discuss it. Obviously, it doesn't refute everything that happened before.
Absolutely.
Not 48, 67, 73. There's so many things that happened throughout the history that can be brought up. But to talk about particularly what's happening now on the evolvement of the situation of Gaza now, I think it's important to start from Oslo and the creation of some form of Palestinian autonomy under the Palestinian Authority. Because before that, the Palestinian had one body that sort of worked towards the Palestinian needs. And it was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the PLO, which was at the time terror group that did terror attacks from throughout even the 60s, the 70s and 80s. And it was in Tunisia and it was in Lebanon and it moved and it settled at the end in the West Bank and Gaza. And they, at the end of the day, had to take down their arms to eliminate the military wing in order to enter a political process. And that political process was envisioning basically a two-state solution, at the end of which will be a Palestinian state. But the first step was to create a Palestinian autonomy, to have some sort of a governing body that will run Palestinian lives. And the biggest problem is that this is the same autonomy that exists today. The idea was that Oslo was supposed, everybody criticizes Oslo. A lot of people in Israel talk about how a failure Oslo was. But the problem of Oslo is not Oslo, is the continuation after Oslo. Mm-hmm. After creating an autonomy, you were supposed to be taking further steps until the point where the Palestinian people are able to fully govern themselves, which never happened. Why? Because there were two people who were in that discussion on the Oslo Accords in 93 and 95 to the second Oslo. And it was between the Palestinian leader at the time, Yasser Arafat, and the Prime Minister, Yitzhak Rabin, the Israeli Prime Minister. It's important to mention, we talk about Arafat and Rabin. And I think it's important first to mention that Rabin, before he was Prime Minister, obviously, we said that Arafat led the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, but Rabin was the head of the Israeli army. And there was a famous sentence by him from the period of the First Intifada, when we had Palestinian kids throwing stones at soldiers. And they asked him what to do with these kids. And his answer was break their arms and break their hands, so they can't throw the rocks anymore. He was very brutal. But I think that experience and being there, being in charge of a military, being in a conflict, in a war, is the one that shifted his views, is the one that made him realize that this can't continue like this. It can't work when we control these people's lives and we're inside controlling every aspect of their lives at the time before the creation of the PA. And he had to make that shift from cruelty to realizing that there is no other way but peace. And that's the most difficult thing to do. And honestly, I think Rabin really was maybe the only person who fully 100% committed towards ending the conflict. And I think this is the problem that's highlighted the most, is that no one really ever was fully committed to the process aside from him. If we look at even that period during Oslo, there were a lot of terror attacks on buses in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. There were attempts by some groups of Palestinians to prevent Oslo from happening. And the same thing happened on the Jewish side. I mean, the last thing that killed Oslo was the assassination of the Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin by an Israeli.
And many argue that that's when the Israeli left actually died. It died with Rabin.
That is a claim. And it's interesting. I wonder if that's really true. What do you think about that? Do you feel that it's not the same left anymore that talks about, wholesome peace at least? How do you see it? I
think we as a whole, as a collective, whether you want to call that left, whether you want to call that Palestinians and Israelis, which we will touch upon during the episode when we're going to talk about peace building, we don't actually have a vision. We don't know what peace is. We we try to compare it to different conflicts, but we don't have an actual concrete, like we say, two-state solution. But everyone, even in the field, doesn't see it as close, as within hand's reach. So, did it die with Rabin? Did it not die with Rabin? I don't know. I can't actually. I can't say, but I think everyone. I think the Israeli left needs to check itself, whether it's in regards to the terminology that they use, whether they are fantasizing a utopia. Because I think we're set into two extremes: the extreme that thinks that is literally in La La Land and doesn't really know what
the
reality is, and they're in the extreme left and they're advocating for Palestinian rights, and they are using the Palestinian terminology, which they don't know what that means. And then we have the other extreme, which is, just put them there. Let's have a two-state solution so they can all be there, so they're not our problem
far
anymore.
away from us.
Yes, which isn't a peaceful solution. They just want to push people away, it's not our problem anymore. Give us our borders. And there are people that claim to be left or are labeled as left and want more land or want to recognize some settlements. The left has to check itself. And yes, there is something that did die with Rabin.
Now I'm thinking about it, and I'm trying to pinpoint where I noticed. I wouldn't say the left died. I think there is a point in which the word peace died in Israel.
Yeah.
I remember, and I don't think it was Rabin, to be honest. I think it was the Second Intifada. Because I remember even right before the Second Intifada, there was still hope. And I think it's important also to emphasize that when Rabin pushed for this, for Oslo Accords, there was a vision, and there was, people latch onto hope. People want hope. And when that was started, people latched onto it. People wanted to feel hopeful. And it stretched. It didn't die with his murder. I remember in the early 2000s, in the Intifada, and right even before the Intifada, in 1999, something like this, when I was in school, we were still drawing doves and olive branches and the word peace and writing it in Arabic and Hebrew and salam and shalom and all these things. And we had a visit of a Jewish school to our school, and we went to their school. There was that still existed in the early 2000s. By the end of the Second Intifada, that died, and the word peace hasn't really existed since then in Israel. And that's part of the problem. But when people have that word, when they see that it exists, where there is a platform for it, when you give them real hope, they will take it. The problem is that we haven't given real hope.
That's interesting. Do you think that, I don't think we didn't highlight who assassinated him. It was an extremist Israeli.
I think I mentioned that he was Israeli, but yeah, it's important to mention that it was talking about an extremist person.
No, but I'm mentioning that, but do you think it didn't die
because it was an Israeli who killed Rabin?
Because as an extremist person, an extremist right-wing terrorist that assassinated Rabin. But you're saying that it died during the Second Intifada, which wasn't of, quote unquote, their doing.
And and when Rabin died, in the same time there were also we had extreme Jewish person who assassinated and killed Rabin, and we had the extreme Palestinians who were doing terror bombings of buses, trying to prevent it also from happening. Extremists on both sides would try to attempt and to prevent the peace. What we have to do is to keep on going regardless of those voices, and I think that's what Rabin did, and no one was able to do it since. Because Rabin and people, talked to him about the fact that how are you doing this in the middle of terror attacks? But he understood that you don't make peace with your friends. You make them with your enemies. And he was going to negotiate with an enemy. And he was aware that part of the people within that enemy group are going to try to prevent it, but he will not let them. And he will not let the extremists on his side do the same. And unfortunately, he's not with us anymore, because that was the last vision that we had for a real solution for a very long time.
Which I think is a good transition to
to what happened after. Like Arafat was the counterpart, and Arafat died in 2004. And after Arafat's death, there was a question, there was a vacuum. Who controls the Palestinian Authority? And the problem then was that the United States pushed for democratic elections in the Palestinian Authority. Now, the US always has this vision when it comes to a country, especially for some reason, it happens a lot in the Middle East. They come to a country, fight, control, and then they say, well, we're going to drop this thing for you guys called democracy. It worked for us perfectly. You should do the same.
Here you go.
And, they did that for Iraq as well, and it failed. The government that was supported by the US collapsed. And here they also tried to push for it. And what they did was try to push for elections. And guess who won? Hamas won the election. And Israel obviously was against the elections in the first place. I think Israel was aware of what was going to happen after that. And that division, it could be very dangerous. And it was. Because when Hamas won, the United States suddenly woke up and was like, oh, wait a second, you guys still have a military wing, which Fatah, the former PLO, doesn't. PLO.
Yeah, but in order for them to fill in for the PA, which...
Yeah, so like in order to turn from PLO to PA, they needed to eliminate their military wing. And now Hamas supposedly had to do the same. And well, Hamas said, of course not. And then, and that was the condition for the continuation of aid to the Palestinian Authority from the US. Who latched onto this? Fatah, of course. And we're like, hold on a second. If we're going to be taking all the money and the support from the US, you cannot run and you cannot be the governing body, even though you won the elections. We don't care.
You don't qualify.
Exactly. You don't qualify.
They took it as the best excuse. You disqualify, so we take control.
Literally. I couldn't sum it better. And that resulted in a war. I mean, they say it's the Fatah-Hamas conflict. I'm sorry, it was a Palestinian civil war. Everybody who's supportive of Fatah in Gaza was either killed or kicked out of Gaza, and vice versa for Hamas. Right now in the West Bank, you have some people who are, personally supportive of Hamas, but not as an organization. As an organization, doesn't exist anymore, but it did before. But it was eradicated. Both sides made sure that they control one half of the Palestinian...
They eliminated the presence of the other side.
1,000%. And that leads us to the position where Hamas controls Gaza. It starts from those elections. This is the pivotal point.
So wait, I have a question. Was there elections in Gaza and in the West Bank, or was it mutual elections?
It was elections in both as one. Okay. It wasn't two separate entities. That separation of two entities was created because of that.
Yeah, and the separation plays in the benefit of Israel to separate and control.
Well, there is the divide and conquer quote that we know, but there is also another thing, and we'll delve more into how particularly Netanyahu's governments were utilized Hamas's presence in Gaza later on in this episode.
We interrupt this episode to express our heartfelt gratitude to our supporters and our Patreon members. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this is a reminder that if you join our Patreon community, you will have access to exclusive content and you will be the first to know when we have something going on in your city. So that is your reminder to join the Patreon, and you can do it with the link in our description. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate it a lot.
What do you think of that? Elections in the Palestinian Authority at that time, is that the problem? Was that what created the issue in the first place?
Of course not. Of course not. I think the states has the habit to advertise democracy as the right for all, solution fits all kind of slogan, but it's completely false because you can't fix different problems with the same solution. We're different people, and democracy is just a modern invention of the West, and it doesn't necessarily work for people in the Middle East. I mean, we can see prospering. You can say whatever you want about the Middle East, but we can see Qatar. We can see the UAE. They're flourishing. They're thriving. Specifically, the UAE. Like, look at Dubai. Everyone wants to go and live in Dubai. It's literally almost, I think, the safest place on earth.
Without being a democracy.
Without being a democracy. So to say that because democracy failed, that's the problem. No, democracy didn't fit. There was a problem before the introduction of democracy to Hamas and Fatah, or to Palestine. And there was a problem after, because democracy wasn't the fit solution. I mean, I'm a liberal woman. I want democracy. And I think both of us, I speak for both of us when I say that we want democracy to flourish everywhere, including the Middle East. But what I'm trying to emphasize on is that democracy isn't just a state of governance. It's values, it's principles that must be inserted within communities and then implemented. It's a process. It's not something where you can come or say, hey, I've got something for you and it's going to work perfectly. You've never heard of it before. It's called democracy and you need to have democratic elections. It doesn't work that way. It needs to be implemented not only within the political people, but also within the population itself. I mean, it's debatable whether the people there in the Middle East under dictatorship that we stated are flourishing, if they're happy or not. But we can say the same thing about democracies like the states. Are they happy? It's the same argument. So not one solution fits all, and democracy needs to be introduced as a value.
So what is the problem? What was it? The leadership of Arafat? I mean, you know, you were raised in Sheikh Jarrah, in East Jerusalem, as someone who's from there. What are the perceptions that you heard, even growing up, around you? How did people perceive the Palestinian leadership as a whole? Mm-hmm. And Arafat in specific, and maybe we'll ask about Abu Mazen later on in this episode, because we'll have to delve into that a little bit.
I'll answer that question as someone not only who grew up in East Jerusalem and Sheikh Jarrah, but also someone who studied in the West Bank in Al-Quds University. So when it comes to Arafat, I don't think there's 100%, like there is no one opinion about him. There are people that to this day that I personally know that have his poster in their house, both in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. There are people that say that the PA or Fatah used to be great, but after the death of Arafat, people became corrupt. At the end of the day, Arafat was an icon. He was a symbol. He showed a lot of things, he tried to demonstrate, he tried to be Palestinian. He tried to be that word.
He tried to be Mr. Palestine, I think. It's also a book I read in the past. He's tried to create Palestine in his image as a figure. Mm-hmm. And do you think because of that and his death, something of the Palestinian identity died with him? Is that, or did he leave too big of a vacuum?
I think he left big shoes to fill. He was something very big in the Palestinian eye. To this day, like in all universities, the day of his death, which is coming up, the 11th of November, is commemorated in Palestinian universities. And I remember as a kid that was as a student in Al-Quds universities, and I was also someone who was removed from politics. I arrived to school one day and to university, and there was flags all over. Like, I haven't seen this outside of Israel. Like, usually it's like Israeli flags everywhere. And on campus, there was flags all over, classes canceled.
Flags of Fatah.
Flags of Fatah all over, people rallying, chanting. There was a second of silence. And that says a lot because it's these kinds of organizations where Fatah and Hamas did come up did rise, and their peak was, or their origins are from universities. That's how they started. And I also was in university during an election in the universities, because they're like hubs in universities, and they're managed by Fatah, by Hamas, which also is something big that we can talk about in future episodes. And again, I'm part of a family that's removed from things politically. But on that day of elections, I had a lot of people that I knew from East Jerusalem and from the West Bank that called me, hit me up, and told me, you know, you're voting for Fatah, right? And these are people that I've never talked with politically. But so there's a place, and that the name of Fatah isn't, yes, it's gone towards a certain direction, but people's devotion for Abu Ammar, for Yasser Arafat, stayed. Another thing that Yasser Arafat did or attempted to do, I think it's debatable whether he did it successfully or not, but he in a way could talk to the international community in one way, while showing the Palestinian community that they weren't compromising on their identity and on their strength, but doing people. The only way that I can explain it is through giving an example of his speech to the General Assembly when he gave his famous speech of, "I come bearing you in one hand an olive branch, and in the other hand a freedom fighter's gun. Don't let the olive branch fall from my hand," or something. And it sounds weird when it's in English, but when you try and dissect this, it's talking to both the international community in a way, and at the same time talking to the Palestinians in a way that don't make me drop the olive branch, and I'll always be ready because I'm not compromising. So it shows the Palestinians that we're not failing, we're not losing anything. It's a choice that we're making. We haven't failed. And that's something that's a rhetoric that the PA right now does not have. It lacks desperately. That's why they lost the support or any recognition from Palestinians, specifically in the West Bank.
That's really fascinating because, the so-called leader after him hasn't got even nearly the same admiration or support or idealization. The current Palestinian leader, Abu Mazen, is really bashed by the Palestinian community. I mean, he's not supported by anyone, from what I see. But I guess maybe that's from what you said. He had too big of a shoes to fill. But I think also that's part of the reason why maybe the best deal that ever was on the table was denied by the Palestinian Authority, and it was in 2008. 2008, the Prime Minister of the time, Ehud Olmert, was really going for a groundbreaking deal with the Palestinians. He was even willing to offer something that, talk to Israelis today, it's not even on the table. It's not even close to being on the table. It's non-negotiable. He was willing to split Jerusalem in half.
Including the Western Wall and the
Western Wall, Temple Mount, all the religious sites, and the entire Old City. Go mention that to any Israeli today and see what they respond.
And
no way.
Mention it to Palestinians today that don't know this fact. They would also be like, what?
How did that not happen? And because it's important to mention two things, I think. There is, in the Palestinian, both sides, and this is what we're trying to emphasize here. Both sides have led us to the place of failing to create better future. Whether it will be the Palestinians and the Israelis trying to sabotage Oslo in the 90s, whether it will be the second Intifada.
And then you have the continuation of the settlements that have not stopped, but have been allowed to expand, and sometimes even more encouraged to expand by the Israeli government.
Always. I mean, we've seen expansion of settlements since they started in the 70s and 80s. And, the only period that we saw a little bit of freeze was during Rabin's time, his attempt to actually try to make a peace process. But other than that, every single government in history has expanded settlements. I think it's important to mention that this is an act from the Israeli side to prevent peace from happening, to prevent two-state solution from happening.
And it's not only the existing and continuation of building of settlements, because it's not only that. With the settlements comes settler violence, which not just politically prevents a solution, but inserts fear and a threat to the Palestinians of any Israeli existence.
Yeah, 1000%. And even if you're trying to do the two-state solution and you want to draw that line, 67 is like not existent anymore. All the settlements are inside of it, and even the way and the places that they're in are places to prevent a direct line from being created. So there is a clear attempt by the Israeli government to prevent peace from happening. Whether it will be the Palestinian Authority here also not accepting a deal that was actually a good one, because there was still a perception of all or nothing approach.
Or Netanyahu's rule, which we'll get into a second. That
he needs his own time. He needs his own section of the episode.
Maintained the status quo till this day.
That's we will get right into that here. And, but right before that, Olmert tried to do this deal, and there was a perception of the Palestinian side of all or nothing. It's either we take all of Palestine back or we don't take anything at all. And we'll never get that deal again. No one will ever raise that topic of splitting Jerusalem now. It's a missed opportunity. So I think there are two problems on the Palestinian side. One is the all or nothing approach. And the second problem is that, let's just put it this way, the Palestinian Authority doesn't want a two-state solution, in my opinion.
Because they're cozy.
Doesn't.
They're okay.
Yeah, exactly. They're sitting in a place where it's very comfortable. On one hand, I'm the authority, I'm the governing body. I run this area. I take all the support from the US, from the UN, from Europe, from all over, and none of the responsibility. Because anything that happens to my people, the first thing I'll say, well, I mean, we're occupied. We're occupied. What do you want? It's Israel's fault. Go talk to Israel. I mean, we saw it even from Hamas now. They're saying about the targeting civilians. They're saying, I'm sorry, it's Israel and the international community's fault. So it's the same thing. They take none of the responsibility. And come on, we know the amount of money that's getting to the West Bank, to the PA, is ridiculous. And at the end of the day, it's going to private pockets. It's going to the pockets of these people and not to the population. One more thing that I also heard, and I hear from friends, particularly in the West Bank, that they're occupied twice. One is by the state of Israel, but the second one is that they're occupied by the PA. The PA controls everything in their life. If you want to open a business in the West Bank, you need the approval of the PA. And if you're not connected directly to the PA, and if you don't have contacts, it's really hard for you to create a business. It's really hard for you to create a living in dignity in a really rough situation in the West Bank. The poverty is really high, but the PA is living comfortably. And it's because they share none of the responsibility.
I mean, I'd say the same, occupied twice as a woman, one by the Palestinian patriarchy and two by Israel. But that's another story.
I can't argue with that one. But I think it's the other person we should talk about. We talked about the Palestinian side of preventing any peace process. And I think it's important to also discuss the other side that is also preventing, still till today, preventing any discourse.
Benjamin Netanyahu, the person who, since what year?
Since 2009.
Since 2009 has kept us in limbo, in the same situation of every year and so we have bombings with Gaza and kill Hamas just enough that they stop but still exist. Why? Because it helps him maintain the status quo. It kills a two-state solution. Each and every time it's brought up, there's Hamas.
There's a terrorist organization. What do you want from us?
And look at where it's led us. Look at where we are. Look how much suffering, how much blood has shed ever since. Not just now, not just Israeli and not just Palestinian. Since I don't know when was the first war? 2000.
We had the first operation in Gaza was 2008, and then we had another one 2011, and another one 2014.
And now.
other than that, and now, and other than that,
these are just the significant ones.
Yeah, we had
Sometimes
one
it's
in-
twice or 3 times a year where Gaza gets bombed.
yeah, we had big one in 2021, and in the middle we had so many clashes. I mean, you're someone who's from Jerusalem, you know more than any of us the escalations that happened, while people in Tel Aviv and in other areas of the country felt that they live in a facade position of, we live in peace. It doesn't matter what happens where I don't see. But things were boiling. I mean, things happened in Jerusalem between the last military operation in Gaza in 2014 and today.
Cuckoo every day.
And what you should share with us a little bit with our audience, what was Jerusalem like? Because some people think that nothing happened and then out of nowhere we have another war. But there were so many signs that nothing is resolved. There's still a conflict. It's important to mention that, it's not like since 2014 till today, there was this, gap of quiet, and out of nowhere now we have another escalation. There is a facade perception that, things are quiet. There is some form of peace, but it wasn't really. Because if we look at particularly where you're from Jerusalem and East Jerusalem, since 2014 till today, we always had things, and I would love for you to share with us your experience living there when it was a period of stabbings, of running people over with cars, civilians and soldiers. So these things were happening on the ground. And what was that like for you to be there?
Horrifying. Now that I look back at it, as a kid living through those conditions, no one should live like that. Even if you're going to school, you continue kind of a normal life where you grow up, get married, and the circle of life continues. But I was in school and I had school trips being canceled or postponed. Why? Because there were constant terror attacks. There was a slogan of أربعة الدعس or أربعة خميس الطعن, which means the Wednesday of running over, or the Thursday of stabbings, where we would know, everyone would know, it would be all over. And it was also a digital war that back then, that on this day, each and every week, something is going to happen. And sometimes because people expected it, those who are either depressed or are driven by political motives or have a shit ton of hate in their heart would use that as, okay, someone's got to do it, so I'll do it. And as a kid, I would always be like scared on my tippy toes all the time, because I would go to school by foot, and someone who knows that when they commit a terror attack, that's the end of their life, either in life in prison or being like they're going to die, being killed on the spot. They're not going to differentiate. They're not going to make 100% sure that the person that they're killing is the person that they want to kill. So it was terrifying to know that. But at the same time, we were naive. We were in the mess of everything because this was normal. This happened every single day. This happened every single year. That's what we know to be true. And that's removing also the annual clock of Ramadan and the cat and mice, the Tom and Jerry back and forth between Israelis and Palestinians on Ramadan. Each and every political person is looking at the clock when it nears Ramadan because they know that there's going to be escalation. And again, I don't know what to say. What came first? The Palestinians like be troublemakers, or the
Israeli enticement,
or the Israeli enticement. I can't say. I think it's each and every incident is something new, but it's known that Ramadan there are going to be escalations.
I think what you said just now is probably the biggest indicator that it's normal in a way. I think it's exactly that we created that these things, this reality is our normal. And we never paused and thought, how is that not normal? And I think that same thing happened to the Israelis. I mean, which still makes me like wonder with everything that you're saying and these horrific experiences, and that it's a Wednesday of running and Thursday of stabbing. How did the people in Israel continue to support the government that pretended to, keep them secure. I mean, Bibi's slogan was Mr. Security. That was his thing. That
It was a facade. He's Mr. Facade.
He is the one. Now we discover something else, being Mr. Facade. But at that time, he was Mr. Security. How did people? And I'm genuinely asking, I'm wondering, how did people not see the things that are happening in East Jerusalem as an indicator that there's still a conflict, that we're still living in a conflict? This is not done. This is not resolved. How is that possible?
I think it's easy to brainwash people. It's extremely easy to brainwash people through the media, through news, through social media, because you're directing them towards. You make them feel like they're one unit, like the pain of the other is because like the terrorist was neutralized, so the threat is gone. They put up the siege next to the bus stops, so you're protected when you wait for the bus. No one's gonna ram you with a car. And it's even ridiculous how me and you are talking about this like it's nothing, like we're talking about how to make pancakes. But also on the Palestinian side, the propaganda. Like, yes, Netanyahu convinced everyone that they were safe, that we live in this utopia where these villains want to hurt us, but we're protecting ourselves, and forgot to promote to solving the problem, to actually putting an end to the suffering and not postponing and preventing, and just preventing it. And on the same side, on the Palestinian, I grew up thinking that each and every terror attack was planted by the state of Israel.
Wow.
Yes. Each and every stabbing, I was convinced, and the entirety of my community was like, there's no way that's true. There's no way that's true.
That this is staged,
That
this
it's
is
staged.
fake,
That it's staged.
that this is fake news?
Yeah, not that it's fake news, that the soldier planted the knife.
I see what you're saying. So basically they
Each
killed
and
the guy,
everyone.
like, oh, they dropped a knife because he never tried to stab anyone.
And making ourselves feel, I don't know what the psychology of it is, but up until I met an actual sister of someone who worked with me in East Jerusalem. She was the sister of someone who committed an attack, and her sister survived. She's in prison till this day. And when I started talking to her, and I was like she would say it but not say it, and everyone around her would say it's staged, and she would be completely silent. And that's when I realized, I was like, we are living in such a facade. We are living in such a hoax of thinking each side is playing the victim each and every time in their own way.
It's easy to be the victim,
And it's easy to hate.
and it's easy to hate. And I think, like you're saying, both sides are promoting that, and both sides have tried to promote an elimination of the other side, and not only by the people, but even to eliminate the idea. There is questioning whether or not there is a Palestinian identity, which we touched upon last episode, questioning whether or not Israel, Jewish people will have any attachment to this land whatsoever, or do they even have a right to be here? There's always that elimination of the other side. And maybe that's a good way to turn to our first segment for today.
You read my mind. Fact-checking. Okay, for this episode's fact-checking, we are going to talk about something that is tragic, to say the least. The denial of both sides' suffering. You have many people that are requesting both sides to provide evidence, specifically the people that are denying what happened on the 7th of October. I think we can both confirm, both from people that we know that perished, friends that are constantly in funerals, colleagues, co-workers that are constantly in funerals, the streets are empty. And also from connections to medics, both Arab and Jewish medics, that can confirm the people that were burned, that can confirm the people that were killed, tortured, and beheaded. And I think we should once and for all say that you can't deny it. Denying it, the same as the fact as removing the posters, does not eliminate or make your suffering less. It doesn't. That happened. It's horrible. It's undescribable, and may God be with all the families of the victims and the kidnapped, and may God be with all the families in Gaza right now. But denying each other's suffering goes on for the Gazans, for the Israelis, and also Arabs in the region, by the way, that are sending footage of films and movies, saying that, oh, here's Pallywood. Do you know the term?
I have never heard that one before.
Pallywood, which means it's the Palestinian game where they act like they're suffering, where they act that they're dying. And I've seen multiple tweets, and it is shameful.
From the Arab world.
From the Arab world and other. Of course, it doesn't start in the Arab world, or maybe. I think I'm being optimistic that it doesn't. But
it has reached the Arab world.
It has reached the Arab world. It's resurfacing again. I see it resurface each and every war. This footage of documentary films, with cameras, and people saying, oh, look, it's all fake, or seeing photoshopped images of martyrs, of people dying with smiles. Have you seen that before? The smiles? There's this slogan of we're always laughing. That you're arrested with the peace sign and smile. That nothing can break you. Nothing breaks you. So
it was turned to, oh, you're smiling because nothing is happening.
You're faking it. You're faking it. And many people, I think, to boost morale for some reason, photoshopped like smiling images of martyrs. And I'm using martyrs because as a general term, I'm not like specifying what I'm talking about, but people that perished as victims, and
because we never know who. Yeah, that's part of the problem of you don't know if the dead is a civilian, a combatant. You don't know. These stats are not given to us by anyone.
So both of them, or all of them, someone photoshopped smiles on them to boost morale, or for some odd reason, I don't know. And people saw that, and they photoshopped this picture. That means they photoshopped all pictures. It's all fake. None of it's fake. Don't trust Palestinians. They are not suffering. They're only trying to pull on the Arab leg to get money, and on the American leg to get money. And that's completely false. So do not undermine other people's suffering. It does not make yours more legit and more painful and more worthy of a solution.
100%. I couldn't have said it any better.
The next point that I would like your opinion on is, I've seen a lot of Israeli influencers talk about Gaza wasn't occupied. We pulled out of Gaza. How can you call it an occupation? We as in Israel, we even give Gaza water and electricity. What other state does that? What do you have to say for that?
I mean, we've gone a little bit through the history of what happened in Gaza, and I think one of the important things to mention, first of all, I mean, the territory itself was controlled by Israel up until pulling out of the settlements within the Gaza territory, something that happened in 2005. And but regardless, when there are two things. When Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005, first of all, it did so unanimously, and it did so one-sidedly. Mm-hmm. And it didn't do it with an agreement with the Palestinian Authority. It did it for its own vision of, if we pull away, we'll keep our people, and we don't want to deal inside. We don't want to work inside Gaza. We don't want to control internally within the Gazan street, as it's still the situation today in the West Bank. But the problem is that even when you pull out, I mean, first of all, the territory is under your control. Even if you're not physically, militarily there, it's you're controlling the territory ever since '67. So water, electricity is under your jurisdiction at the end of the day.
Import, export, fishing, everything, even their travel.
And their travel. If you're not leaving from Egypt, any other way that you want to leave, you need the IDF's approval. So how is that not being occupied? I can't leave if I don't have the approval of the IDF. And or if I want to work, or if I want to, working in Israel is a different example because you're going to a different territory. Mm-hmm. But fishing on your own area, fishing on your own territory.
And
You're limited.
We've seen many that died due to fishing and accidentally going through like a little bit over the border, and innocent civilians dying, being shot and targeted to the cause of that.
Because there is restriction on how many people are allowed to go fish.
Yeah.
And that number changes. If there's a clash going on, Israel restricts fishing. So you are controlling what's happening to them during times of war. You are restricting or allowing them more. So I'm sorry, you didn't leave Gaza. If you left Gaza in terms of soldiers' foot on the ground, it doesn't mean that you're not controlling the lives of these people still.
Mm-hmm. And Gaza isn't a state.
And it's not a state.
There is no state of Gaza.
It's only a part of what was the PA, and obviously the separation of the PA into two entities, it created even a worse situation where Gaza is controlled by one entity, Hamas, and that eventually led to the siege on Gaza and the blockade that exists until today.
Second and last segment is the terminology within the conflict. So when it comes to terminology within the conflict, there is one term that's very widely used when describing people of Israel, which is settlers, colonialists.
Foreign colonialists,
yes.
Even.
Foreign colonialists.
And yeah, we're here to discuss another issue that comes from that, is that basically the argument of you're not from here. Mm-hmm. This is not yours. So
go back to Europe.
So go back. Go back to Europe. And you know, if we're looking at, if we are going back right now in time into 1948, the majority of the Jewish people did come from Europe. And the vast majority at that time came from Europe. Because the people from the Arab world came also later, from the Arab states.
We understand where the term comes from.
It comes from the fact that these people came after World War II and the Holocaust, and they were the people who came here physically. But me and you are the third or fourth generation since the 1948 war. Mm-hmm. And just like we're third or fourth generation, for the Jewish people, for Israelis, there's also a third and fourth generation. And I think it's important to understand that even if the majority back then came to this land, regardless of their personal religious association to it or not, you know, discussing religious connection to a land is very personal. There is no right and wrong in it. So you can't refute it or say that it's right or to say that it's wrong. It's solely personal. But if we look at the fact on the ground, 75 years ago, the majority of people came here for their own reason. But today, the vast majority of Israelis are natives to this land because they were born here, just like me and you were born here. Our colleagues who are Jewish who live in Israel, that's the only reality they also know. They're not Europeans. They don't live in Europe. They don't have European culture. They're Israelis with Israeli culture, with a reality that's the only one they also know, just like the one that we also know.
Even if we are technically telling them to go back from they came from and they have roots in Europe, that doesn't mean that they have European citizenships. Some of them have been here through generation and generation, as do we, and have nowhere else to go. They can't pack up their bags. They only have Israeli citizenship. And of course, there is a percentage that I don't think is very large, that have the privilege of having American or European or somewhere else, and can use that passport to leave, to flee during time of war, and then come back where and everything is fine. But and people that can now, due to Germany changing its law and being a little bit more flexible, can also apply to European citizenship. But people like us, like me and you, like other Israeli Jewish people, don't have those kinds of privileges. And that's why it's another reason why we're here, because we have no other choice.
We have nowhere else to go. And I say that a lot to my Israeli friends. You know, some of you have the opportunity, the option, because you have ancestry somewhere else as well. I don't. The only one I have is here. So that's the only place I can be at. And that's the only reality I have. But I mean, you know, even a lot of these people who have dual citizenships, at the end of the day, they were born here and raised here. So their reality and their understanding of the world and the way that they see themselves is as Israeli, as someone who's from here. Like, even if they go back to Germany, they go as Israelis. They don't go as Germans. Because they also, like us, are born here, and that's the only reality they also know.
this is home for them.
It's home for all of us. And I think it's important to emphasize that we have something in common, which is the love and passion to this land. And it shouldn't be, it's either my love to this land or yours. If we both love it, great. So let's take care of it.
Why can't it be a reason of union? Of course, this is kind of a utopic way of thinking, but why are we looking at either or? Why can't we celebrate the land that we love so much and actually honor it instead of slaughtering blood?
On that point, I think there is a sense of ownership. And when you own, you don't care as much.
Yeah.
Meaning, and that's something a very close friend of mine from my master's, a Jewish friend from Mexico, Rodrigo, if you're listening, he was telling me, and I will never forget this sentence. And he said, Ibrahim, I don't understand. How do you have two sets of people who feel so passionately about this place and they claim it as their own and not the other, but they both treat it as one giant trash bag? Because we do have a littering problem in both the Israeli and the Palestinian cultures. We love this land so much, but we don't take care of it. We go to any national park and see the littering and see how horrific it looks. But it's because of ownership. There's a sense of, if it's mine, I can do whatever I want with it.
Yeah.
It comes from that. And we need to eradicate that. And we need to look at the land in a completely different way of loving and a compassion to the land, and not ownership, and not mine, I can do whatever I want, but it's mine and yours, and let's prosper it.
Another term or kind of a slogan that's being used is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. من المية للمية فلسطين عربية. And I know we both have kind of different opinions or the same core opinion about it, but different emphasis that we put, I think. I think each and every Palestinian believes and dreams of a free Palestine free of oppression, discrimination, dehumanization, occupation, elements of genocide and apartheid. And I think these are words that we shouldn't be afraid because we can have to use them because we can see elements of all of them throughout the land. But for those who are chanting with the belief of, or with the meaning of saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, in the meanings of Palestine will be free of Israelis, of Jews, that's where we disagree.
Yeah, I mean, and I've told you this before, that I feel that terms have very specific meanings. And I admire how you are turning and own it, reclaiming the phrase to a place where you feel connected to it, and not to abash it completely. Because phrases do have specific meanings, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, means that this land will become Palestine, and it's instead of being Israel, will be Palestine. It goes back to the place of, I need to defeat the other side in order for myself to be free. My freedom is your destruction at the end. And that's a problem for me, because especially for someone that is advocating for peace and a two-state solution, I can't abide by something that states for one side to have the whole thing versus the other.
And it's not like we're lacking of slogans. Ibrahim today, you guys have to listen to this. Ibrahim today came up with something I have to say is brilliant.
Listen, we don't need to use the same phrases, because we from the peace camp can create our own phrases. And here is my new slogan for you. Free of occupation, Palestine is a free nation.
Snaps.
Say that. And this does not eradicate a state of Israel next to it, because we want Palestine to be a free state. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to go at the expense of a neighboring state of Israel, which is the vision that me and you share for this area, for this place.
I'll add something that I think is very relatable to our Israeli and pro-Israeli listeners that don't have the compassion to see what actually is behind a free Palestine, or from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The nation-state law, which states that the state of Israel is Jewish,
And
We're
it's the
the main
homeland
of the Jewish people.
And as citizens, where are we?
Exactly. Does that mean if you see a free Palestine, or from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free as a threat, and then you come in and you're okay with the nation state law of it being the land of the Jews, does that mean that you see a black and white scenario? If this can work, then the other thing can work, as long as both people on both sides agree.
And I think maybe the difference is from the nation state law, what they're saying is that this is a Jewish state. It's ours. You are more than welcome to come live here.
That's what I'm saying. It can work.
But I don't know, to be completely honest, I don't know, and that's a question, if the free Palestine or from the river to the sea, would that include Jews inside this Palestine?
That, if you ask me, we're both advocating for a two-state solution, because that's
but
the
for
only...
someone who's calling from the river to the sea, would someone like that see Jews in a second-class citizens?
I would say if we ask someone from the protest, because of the simplification of the conflict and how they think that what we just said, that Israelis are all foreign colonizers, I think they would say yes, that it does mean free Palestine from Jewish people or in Jewish existence. Yes. But what I'm saying is that when I tie it to what I said before, it's have dialogue. Ask people what they mean, because especially in the West, they're just using slogans, I have to say. Like, they're using slogans, they're chanting, because that's what we do. We follow.
And slogans are catchy, so use mine.
You gave a perfect one.
I don't know what the problem is. Again, free us from occupation, Palestine is a free nation. Remember that one.
And of course, this is only part of the conversation. We only highlighted a few things amongst various others that we will talk and dive into in future episodes. I invite everyone to tell us what they want to listen to. Tell us what they want us to talk about.
Absolutely. And we invite you to write to us also. Give us your questions. We had one question, actually, who asked us about the two-state solution. And how do we envision
see it?
Because from that comment, it was basically stated that these initiatives and attempts actually led to more wars. But I think from going back to everything that we said today, the problem is not the initiatives. The problem are two things: the people who are leading these initiatives and their willingness to go all the way towards that initiative without a fear. Nobody really went all in. Maybe Robin is the only one did, and look what happened to him. But in general, we need to be braver than we have been so far, and that's where the problem is. It's not in the attempts to make agreements; it's in how they resulted. And look at what's happening right now. I mean, where there's a war in Gaza, and no one's talking about the day after. I mean, it's a very small discussion in Israel about what's going to happen in Gaza after.
But Brahim, it's very difficult to talk about the day after when you have 240 hostages, and when you have people dying, and when you're living under the constant threat of you don't know when there's an alarm going to come off. I can understand the people that can't talk about the day after, and I can understand the people that are that rush to any kind of like solution, like ceasefire now, just bring them back, and they're not seeing what's going to happen after.
I agree, and my claim is not to the people; it's to the government. It's
Absolutely.
to the leadership. The leadership doesn't know what it wants in the day after, and that's the problem, because the leaderships in Israel have led us to the place where we are today.
And they currently do not have a plan, as they did not have a plan before.
Exactly. It exploded in everybody's face on October 7th, that facade fake peace that people thought we live in.
The bubble.
In the most horrific way. And people, everybody talks about we need to eradicate Hamas and eliminate Hamas. And in Israel, there's a discussion as if it's like it's a magic thing to do. And it's important to emphasize, Hamas is not just a governing body. Hamas is an ideology. And ideologies cannot be eradicated like that. Ideologies can be changed with different ideologies. But when there are no other ideologies that exist, there is only one. And that's the problem that exists in Gaza. There is no alternative to Hamas. Israel never provided an alternative to Hamas. It never provided the people with any hope to leave Gaza. If you want to go to work and to go to Europe and study. You need to go through Israel. Like, you had no any vision of a future that you can have, and the only one that provided anything in perspective to you and a context was Hamas. And even if you eliminate every single member of Hamas and their ability to run as a governing body, and there's no Hamas in Gaza, doesn't exist. And if you remember the movie Men in Black, they had that button when they erased people's memories. If you went there and erased every single Gazan's memory that something was called Hamas exists, if you maintain these people after this war blocked with 2 million people without any hope, something else will rise from within Gaza. It's not going to be called Hamas. It will be called something else, hummus, whatever you want to call it. It's irrelevant, but they will resist.
Because of the reality on the ground, because they live towards something that creates a Hamas. If a Hamas trains people or recruits people, the rockets that are falling, the occupation creates as many Hamas militants as Hamas recruits.
Absolutely, because at the end, people come to Hamas in order to find vengeance, find a path towards something, a goal. It provided people with a goal. Even if that goal is as horrific as going and murdering Jewish people, it was a goal that before there was no goal.
Someone said it. I don't know who said it, but Gazans are born dead. They don't see a light. And there's nothing more horrific, more scary than someone who's not afraid of losing everything. Someone who thinks that they have nothing to lose.
And what the state of Israel has done specifically since the blockade on Gaza, from 2008, 2009 until today, Israel has created the biggest recruitment center of the world. 2 million people controlled by one terror group that is the only existing entity there, the only one that gives any goal whatsoever. Of course, people are going to join it. And if it's not going to exist, people will form something. It will be another resistance movement. It will become armed. And with all the fanatic ideologies and the social media and the spread of them, these fanatic ideologies will also be incorporated and will be used. If we don't have a real solution, what we saw on October 7th is not a one-time thing. If it happens in 10 years, 20, 15, or in 2, at the end, we are going towards the same results.
And right now, the situation in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem is becoming worse and worse. Like, for the people that are advocating for Palestinian rights, for the people on the pro-Palestinian side, and even on the Israeli side, should be aware of what's going on in the West Bank. It's not the focus of our episode, so we're not going to provide actual details, maybe next episode. But the situation is escalating. Settler violence is escalating extremely. Like, Google Masafer Yatta. What's happening there is despicable. It's disgusting. And we're leading towards a situation where violence is going to be unavoidable.
It's going to explode in our face
again and again.
And it's time to stop. It's time to take action. It's time for ceasefire, for the return of the hostages, and to start discussing real diplomatic solutions. Because otherwise, we're staying in the same reality.
Not for just the justice for October the 7th, not just for Gaza, a solution for all, where we all can live in peace, where we can all live in dignity. So that's everything that we have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in, for listening. For those of you who are sharing our reels, sharing our Spotify link and our link everywhere on all platforms, we really appreciate it. And next time, we're going to talk about the peace building community. What have we been doing as a peace building camp, where we failed, and where we can improve, and specifics on what me and Ibrahim think should be implemented going on. How can we both, as Palestinians and Israelis, survive and prosper post this war?
And remember, at the end of the day, all of us, Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, and Jews, all of us deserve better.